Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Trolling with Logic for the 22nd of March 2014. It's 7 p.m. here in the UK and it's 3 p.m. Eastern Time over in the States and Canada. Just the usual announcements. That's a live call-in show on all kinds of secular-related issues. If you do want to call in, the Skype contact, it's scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. It's Trolling with Logic. Just send me a quick PM, give me the gist of your question, and we'll add you into the call in due course. Please don't call the show. It'll just annoy us and we'll probably just boot you then. But, and excuse me because I've got a cold right now, so you're probably listening to like a very bizarre Scottish Darth Vader here. And also when you call in, you're granting us permission to use your likeness because all calls are recorded and uploaded for later use. And as you can see in the corner, this is public domain, this recording, so feel free to copy it, mirror it, and distribute it any way you want. And I think that's it. And also, if you can't get through, if you didn't get your question in, contact at Trolling with Logic. And if you want, we could forward the questions on to our guest tonight. So very quickly introduce my panel tonight. Welcoming back as always, Marty. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, and welcoming back as well, Kitch. It's been a while since you've been on, I think.
I missed the last show, but I was there for the one before that.
All right, cool.
So I missed one.
And it's been a very, very long time since our third man here has been on. Welcoming back, Maxman. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm quite confident that nobody remembers me except for the people I'm talking to, but thanks anyway.
The few hardcore...
Who are you again?
All right. So I'll very quickly introduce our special guest tonight. Just to let everyone know, our scheduled guest couldn't make it tonight, so this man has generously offered to stand in. So you'll all know him from the Gin and Tonic show, one of our sister shows. He was a former host there. He's a well-known YouTube vlogger, mostly focusing on counter-apologetics to Islamic claims of science, and most recently a very well-made video series called This Is the Truth Uncut, where he tracked down some scientists who have been court-mined into appearing to support claims of scientific knowledge in the Quran. So a very warm welcome, everyone. Thumbs up in the chat room, and please welcome in the Rationalizer. How are you doing?
Good evening, everybody. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Thanks for coming along. It's good to have you. So I don't know, does any of the panel have any questions ready, or shall I just get started?
Sure. Just a general question to start up. How did you get into video making, and why did you decide to focus on your video series?
I feel artistic, but I'm rubbish at art. So I do stuff with computers, and it's kind of a good way to do artistic things because other people have written special effects and stuff. So you can kind of use those and then pretend you're really good. So it kind of made me feel artistic. That's why I made videos. Really, I think it was just a long time ago when I was at a low point in my life. There was at some point someone was showing me some leaflets telling me about all these miraculous scientific things in the Quran, and you know, quite gullibly at the time I was looking at them and I thought these are really convincing, you know, not realising that they'd really been translated. And I think I was ready to go out proselytising, and but the first people I would have wanted to do that to would have been my family, and in anticipation of their counter arguments, I decided that I would try to counter argue myself, so that I could have an answer ready for them. And I ended up counter arguing myself out of it. And after spending that much time doing it, I just thought, well, I can either just be happy that I've worked it out and go on with my life, or I can record it, you know. And I just think I'll make the videos that I wish I could have watched a year and a half ago or something at the time I started making them, that would have saved me the time. So that's basically it. And so throw that in with a little bit of desire to be creative, and that's how it ended up starting.
One thing, the history of the whole science in the Quran, where did that actually spring from? Was it Sheikh Zindani that really, was he the kind of popularizer of that, really?
Well, you get what before that, I think it's probably in the 70s, Maurice Bucaille. He was the physician to is it King? I forgot the name. King Faisal, I think. And he was asked to write a book, which was something like the Bible, the Quran in light of science, or something like that. I forget the name. And basically, what it was is it was an exercise in saying, if we take the Bible literally, it's wrong, but if we don't take the Quran literally, it's not wrong. So rather than saying it contains this miraculous information, what they were doing was saying, if you've got any kind of scientific knowledge, don't worry, you're not going to lose your faith because I can explain everything. So it'd be stuff like how the Quran will talk about everything being created in 6 days. So what he'd do then is he'd go on to say the Arabic word liyom not only means days, but can mean some kind of epoch. So, that's not contradictory. And basically he went through what people would see as problems and told you why they're not problems, which he then pushed a slight bit further with a claim on the death of the Pharaoh of Moses, and tried to kind of push that a little bit as a bit of a miracle. But it was after that, really. I think that was the first step towards it.
Okay.
But then Zindani took it further. He was apparently doing talks at various universities in the Middle East, and it was allegedly one of Zindani's talks that got him introduced to Osama bin Laden, and set him off on his religious career. And he was his spiritual advisor. Apparently, he was the person that used to advise him whether or not a certain kind of attack was permitted or forbidden. And this Zindani had taken it further and was saying not only is it compatible with stuff, but it actually preempts scientific discovery, talks about things he couldn't possibly have known, which he then took onto a further level by tricking these various scientists to say certain things, which he then took out of context and pretended that the scientific community of the West believed it too.
Okay, Marty, there's a chat room question that just came
Yes.
in.
Can you address Quran chapter 67 verse 5? Muslims claim it has scientific basis. Okay, for one, what is it?
It says that Allah ordained the sky with lamps and used them as missiles to drive away jinn. I think that's roughly what it says.
Okay.
Now, I don't think it actually literally mentions stars. It just says lamps. The heavens were decorated with these lamps.
If you want, I can say the verse here just to clarify.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we have, from of old, adorned the lowest heaven with lamps, and we have made such lamps as missiles to drive away evil ones. We have prepared for them the penalty of the blazing fire.
So,
and just what's the science that apparently supports this?
Actually, it's probably one of the clearest things in the Quran that contradicts science. I mean, when it's talking about decorating the heavens with lamps, it's pretty obvious that you've beautified the heaven with lamps. It's talking about stars, obviously. When it talks about using them as missiles, it's then talking about shooting stars. The back-end story to this is supposed to be that whenever some kind of revelation was given to a prophet on earth, that the jinn would all stand on each other's shoulders and make a really tall jinn pyramid. Jinn being a person that's made out of fireless smoke, but looks like a normal human. They'd make these jinn pyramids so that they could get really close to heaven and listen to what the revelations were. so then they could get down to the soothsayers really quickly and give them a bit of the revelation, but mix in a little bit of lies. So then you'd hear the beauty of the revelation, and it'd be mixed in with lies, and they'd use it to trick people. So what Allah would then do is he'd shoot shooting stars at them to shoot them down, to stop them from doing that. So that's the background of this verse. I mean, if you look at literally what it says, the nearest heaven was adorned with lamps to beautify the nearest heaven. Shooting stars aren't in the sky adorning it and beautifying it. They're only there for a split second. So it appears to be talking about the stars being the lamps, and that from the stars come missiles. They've made these stars missiles. So it seems as if it's saying that shooting stars either are actually stars or come from stars, and that they shoot down these jinn. Now, obviously, there's a lot of problems with that. Obviously, but I mean, first of all, if it is one of the apologetics that I've heard on this is, well, it's not wrong. Receding back to the Maurice Bouquet level, it's not wrong because ultimately they are made in stars, because all the rock and everything's made in stars. So it could be a miracle. But this is saying that if they're saying that the shooting stars have ultimately come from stars, well, they're like the nearest one's like 4 light years away. You'd have to know 4 years in advance where the jinn were going to be and what they were doing, and then shoot something at the speed of light temporarily to get to Earth and shoot them down. I mean, if that doesn't reek of predestiny, then I don't know what does. Interestingly, though, I've been reading a lot on historical cosmology recently, and there were various beliefs, and geocentricity was the one thing that most people believed in. And I mean, the Quran gets it so wrong. It's so much more geocentric than I ever thought it was. But one of these beliefs was Aristotle described that everything above a certain layer, a certain height, was ether. And if stirred, ether would kind of turn into fire. And the sun and the moon and the stars move slowly, which is why they don't burn up. But then some of these beliefs were that this kind of dome over the earth called a firmament, and it blocks out the light from the heavens, and amongst the stars were dim stars that you can't see, and that now and again they would fall off the firmament and fall towards earth, and as they did, they'd stir up the ether and burn up on the way down. So there was literally a belief that they were stars stuck on a firmament, and when they fell down, they would burn up as shooting stars. And if you look at this verse in the Quran, mate, it's exactly the kind of wording you would expect from someone who believed that was true. In addition to that, actually, as a point of interest, because there's the person who's written this had this belief that shooting stars shoot down these jinn at times of revelation. What I did is I went to some NASA sites and I backtracked through annual meteor showers, and there was a meteor shower in the holy month of Ramadan on the very year when Muhammad claimed prophethood. So it could possibly have been a bit of an influence on him, looking up in the sky, seeing all these shooting stars during the holy month of Ramadan, and then it's just another part of his confirmation bias, I suppose, that something big is happening. Oh, and it's me. But as to what the science is, I've never heard anyone actually say that this contains any kind of scientific pre-knowledge at all. I've only ever heard people try to explain it away and done so badly.
Yep. Just one question related to that, and it's something that comes up quite a lot when you're dealing with Islamic. They always go on about how difficult the Quran is to translate. Is it really that difficult? Is Arabic so difficult to translate into English?
Well, I can't tell you because I don't speak it. I only know a few words and a few semantic rules and things. there are tools on the internet that will let you look at the individual words, see what the root of those words are, where else the words are used in the Quran. So you can look at the same word in different contexts. So that's one useful thing. But I think the very important thing to do is, if you look at the classical commenters on the Quran, and the older the better, really, because they're closer to the beliefs of the time. You can read what people who did know Arabic said about it. So, for example, Al-Jalalain, there was two brothers, the Jalal brothers, and their commentary on this verse is, we have adorned the lowest heaven, the one closest to earth, with lamps, with stars, and made them missiles against the devils, should they attempt to listen by stealth to the revelation, in which case a meteor of fire detaches itself from the star, just like a brand is taken from a fire, and it either kills the jinn or deprives him of his senses. The star itself isn't displaced from its position. Basically, it shoots off a little bit of shooting star. So that's Al-Jalalain. These brothers obviously knew Arabic, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be two of the most famous commenters on the Quran if they didn't. They were the end of the 15th century, early 16th century, and that's only a few hundred years back. And even with the knowledge and advancements that we'd made since the 7th century, they were still claiming that this is what this means, that stars actually shoot off little bits of meteorite. And of course, that was another one of the misconceptions, is that the stars are all the same distance away from the Earth, which is why you don't observe any parallax.
Guys, do you have any follow-up questions there?
Yes, I got a couple questions. Granted, I just want to precursor that the context to which I'm forming a lot of these questions is sort of playing devil's advocate, because, well, it's more fun. Have you ever found any claims in the Quran that were true that don't fit the cultural knowledge in the 7th century in that region?
I have scoured endlessly, and basically what I find in the Quran is mediocre repetition. I mean, it may be beautiful in Arabic. I'm told it is, even by ex-Muslims who are Arabic speakers. They say some parts of it are a bit crap, but some of it are linguistically absolutely beautiful. But, for me, that's not enough of a miracle. How beautifully can you say, when you're dead, we're going to burn your skin off, and then we're going to put some new skin on so we can burn it off again, and that's going to happen forever? I mean, how beautifully can you put that? But all I've ever found in there is things that I would expect from someone that was ignorant of the way that biology and the universe worked. There's misconceptions in there that were common. Is a baby produced from what comes out of the testicles or the kidney? The Quran says it's produced from between your backbone and ribs. That's where your kidney is. All right. How's this excused? Oh, well, during development, this is a miracle, you see. During development, the testicles actually develop in the same place that your kidneys develop. Miracle. Like, yeah, but if you go back further, my anus originates from the same place as my eyeball. That doesn't mean I excrete poo from my eyeball, does it? So I find just one after another, especially in the embryology claims, which people have really twisted to try to make them not wrong. Everything that I see is just simply stuff that people believed at the time in error. Other than that, it's stories that Muhammad seems to have got wrong, and then said, no, I haven't got it wrong. I've come to correct the previous stories because they were wrong. So obviously you can't claim any kind of unknown knowledge there. But as you look through it, I couldn't find a single thing. And, you know, I wanted to. I'll be honest, I really wanted to. You know, I was basically convinced this book was true before I even opened the first page. You know, I was practically a practicing believer at the point I first opened that page. I would do stuff like, I wouldn't touch the book unless I washed my hands first. I hadn't eaten pork for a year. You know, I used to pray and beg for guidance before opening this book. I mean, you know, I did basically, I practically lived my life as a Muslim, even though I didn't identify as one. I got as far as there is no God but Allah, because I was a monotheist, agnostic monotheist, so I had no problem with saying, yeah, Allah's the name of this one God that I believe in. But then obviously the Muhammad bit had to come from reading the Quran, and up to that point I was a complete believer. Then I opened it and I read it, and as I was reading I was thinking, who wrote this book thinks that the earth's flat? Hang on, they think that the sun goes around the earth. You know, and I'm reading this stuff and I'm thinking, no, I've got to be wrong. I've got to be wrong, because somebody would have noticed. You know, and you doubt yourself, because you think, so there's all these people that believe this. You know, I'm obviously being really stupid. But then the more you look at it and you read the exegesis on it, and you look at the classical thoughts on it, and they say things like, yeah, the earth was spread out on the water, just like in Genesis, and all of this stuff's in there, and I put it out of my head. No, I'm not understanding it. I'll put that out of my head. I'll keep reading. The book, if there's an all-knowing, all-powerful entity out there, it will not only know how to convince me with this book, it will also have the power to put that into the book and convince me. And I wanted to be convinced, and I just read it, and it's just, God, this is so damn awful. I really struggled to get to the end of the book. By the time I was halfway through, it was a real chore. But I read it through just in case, you know, on the last page there was the one final thing that would convince me. You know, I gave it a fair try, and I've read it a number of times since. Absolutely nothing beyond common misconception of the time. Absolutely nothing. It's just simply, this is the book of truth, and if you don't believe that, I'm going to burn you.
Okay, so hypothetically, if you did find a verse in the Quran that clearly described the process of evolution down to the very core definition of it in the scientific method, how would that impact you?
Well, at the time, it would have convinced me. Now I would just say that seems to describe the system of evolution through natural selection. You know, I just like, you know, if Darwin had said God came and told me this one day, and then I went out and found all this evidence, here you go, I'd have just thought, oh, he's just gone out and found the evidence. You know, that sounds feasible. I wouldn't have accepted it was from God, because that's a different proof. You know, I mean, the thing is evolution's just yet another thing that the Quran flies in the face of. You know, there's so many Muslims that, I mean, not all of them. You know, there are a lot of Muslims that will say evolution's true, and then there's this middle ground where they say it's true, but only for animals, not humans. Which I can't understand that position at all. So, you know, evolution is a really big sticking point, and, you know, people fund talks at Islamic associations in universities and things, where they'll travel round peddling this anti-evolution rubbish, you know, about how a single cell can't even form, so how can you make an eye, and trilobites used to have thousands of eyes, and now and then later they had less, so that's anti-evolution. That proves the opposite, and you know, and they go around basically giving this information out. If you believe in evolution, you become a Darwinist, which is kind of a code word for you will go around killing crippled people or something. And you know, they paint like this Darwinism as if it's some kind of witch cult or something, you know. And but yeah, that's certainly, thanks Flower. That's definitely an area where the Quran is badly wrong, and the Hadiths, the stories that are accounts of Muhammad's life, the things that are said in there, obviously there's probably like 10 hadiths for every verse, and now, you know, they outright contradict. You know, the Quran's vague because I suppose it had to rhyme, whereas you get to the hadiths and it didn't have to rhyme, so he just came right out and said it. On Monday, Allah created this. On Tuesday, he did this. On Thursday, and on Friday, he created Adam. You know, that's not an epoch. Friday isn't an epoch. You know.
Just out of complete ignorance, what exactly is a hadith?
Right. Muhammad had his companions, which are a bit like Jesus' disciples, and they lived the number of years with him, stayed close to him and what have you. And then, because the Quran says that Muhammad is the perfect example of how to live your life, people obviously thought it's important that we know how he lived his life. So somebody started to compile a list of sayings and actions of Muhammad, and what they did is they had a chain of narration. They call it an isnad. So it would start with Muhammad, and then maybe it would go to his wife Aisha, and then to someone that Aisha told, and someone she told, finally down to the person who catalogued it. And there's various strengths of these. They say, well, that person went a bit mad later in life, so that's probably not true. And this person was known to be a bit of a liar, so that's probably not true, and stuff like this. But then in other cases, you've got one collection, Bukhari, and another collection, Sahih Muslim, and they'll say the same things, maybe through different isnads, which kind of makes it seem stronger that people believed. In other words, it had an older origin of the story at the very least. And a lot of people look to these for jurisprudence. Like, you know, what did Muhammad do when this happened? What did he do when this happened? And, you know, if you look in the Quran, for example, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing about killing homosexuals. It says that Allah killed homosexuals. Well, it says he killed people a lot. It doesn't say explicitly for homosexuality, although it does deride it quite a lot. You know, you've committed something which no animal before you has ever done, and stuff like this. And you know, so Allah killed these homosexuals, but as far as I've seen, I can't see anything in there that says humans should kill homosexuals as a punishment. But then if you turn to the Hadith, it tells you to throw them off cliffs and things like this. So this is where the jurisprudence comes in. You know, this is obviously what you're supposed to do, because Muhammad was supposed to have done it according to these Hadiths. But obviously, you've got to suspect that they were made up for political reasons along the way, like people saying, oh, Muhammad said that the best tribe was us, we're the ISIS and stuff like this. And there are actually hadiths and stuff out there that say this kind of thing. So essentially, that's what a hadith is, and some of them are just utterly ridiculous, and some of them are completely mundane. Like, if you go to the toilet, you have to step into the bathroom with your left foot first. When you leave, you have to step out with your right foot first, because your right foot is more pious than your left foot. So your left foot's got to stay in the dirty room the longest. You know, it's all things like this. You can't have a poo with your bum facing Mecca, and all sorts of things in there. So that is essentially what hadiths are.
All right, Marty, as you're the scientist again, you got a question of your own?
Yeah, actually, I have. I'm familiar with several of the scientific claims the claims about science that are supposedly made in the Quran, but could you just sum up like a few of them, like the ones that are really commonly used by Islamic apologists, and really silly ones I'd really like to hear about?
Scientific claims in the Quran. One of them is it's about waves, internal waves of the sea, what that was, the miracle is supposed to be that at some point we discovered that waves on the ocean surface aren't the only waves. Not only are there different currents beneath the sea, but they actually kind of form waves as well. And the Quran mentions this because it talks about there being waves upon waves. It says something like the non-believers are in darkness. It's like if they look at their hand under the sea, they can't see it because there's no light. But then it says they can hardly see because they're covered by a wave, which is covered by a wave with a cloud on top. And they always miss out the bit about the cloud on top. But,
so apparently that means that they knew about underwater currents.
Yeah, but obviously,
wow,
wave upon wave. If you sit down at the seaside with your socks and shoes off and stick your feet in and do a bit of paddling, if you just look down at your feet and you just watch waves upon waves hitting against your feet. It's just one wave after another. And the thing is with this verse, it's talking about kind of confusing them, as if they're kind of overpowered. And a wave after wave crashing upon you would have that effect. And then
another thing that
underwater and under a cloud, like the two levels of darkness.
I also get sort of the impression that it could, of course I don't get the context, but that they're talking about superposition of waves, which is not an amazing discovery if you could actually see that there are waves within waves.
Yeah,
that's not a hard thing to observe when you're looking at water.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not amazing at all.
I mean, that's one of the things. Is how could Muhammad have known that it's dark at the bottom of the ocean? Well, how about pearl divers that existed a long time before Muhammad probably realised it got a bit darker the deeper they dove.
Yeah, and you can just
when I was a child,
in a boat on deep water, you can look over the side and see.
Why can't I see the sand? When I was a kid, right, my brother used to like fishing. He bored me silly. I'd go off, but as I walked, I'd always notice at the edge of the pond, I could see the fish. And then when I tried to spear them with my bamboo stick, because I was a little boy pretending to be a hunter, they'd swim into slightly darker water, and then it was too dark to see them. And, I was about 6 or 7. If a 6 or a 7-year-old can say it gets darker the deeper the water is, you don't need to invoke God to come up with something like that. Let's see what there's the Quran on mountains, because it says that something about the mountains were placed on the earth. The earth was spread out, and then mountains were placed on it to stop it from shaking. And it was like it uses some phrase that's like stakes or pegs or something like that. And they say, well, they just beg the question, how could he have known about mountains having roots? You'd think they were just like big paperweights. You wouldn't know that they went down into the earth. But then if you look in the Book of Job, someone's telling some story about someone digging down beneath the mountain and digging down to the root of the mountain. So, the fact that it was written down hundreds of years earlier, it was a belief that mountains had some kind of roots. It also supports the idea that the Earth's been spread out, and because it will wobble around and flap, the mountains were put on as paperweights to stop it shaking. But of course, it can't possibly mean that. It's got to mean something else. Origin of the universe. The heavens and the earth were once one, and we tore them asunder. The fact that, like, Egyptians believed in this one entity that was ripped into two different gods, one that formed the earth and one that formed the sky, and they were ripped apart. It's just another regurgitation of something else. Obviously, the heavens and the earth aren't separate. They're all still part of the same thing. Expanding universe. It says something like, look how big the sky is, and we are the expanders. Now, it doesn't say we are expanding it, because that would kind of be a little bit more impressive, because with Arabic you can see if a verb is either a past verb that's finished or a verb that is currently ongoing or going to happen in the future. But unfortunately, this isn't a verb. It's like it just says we are its expanders. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's still expanding. It could mean that when they were together, they were pulled apart, it was expanded. It was once made really big above your head, and we're the ones that did that. Just like I would say, my mother is my giver of birth. But, you know, I'm not still on the way out, obviously. So I wouldn't have the camera on. So, yeah, there's that. And of course, you know, if you do believe in that everything goes around the earth, and you do believe that this dome firmament above your head, what happens each night? Something expands across the sky. The heavens expand across the sky every night. That's a really mundane one. I'm just flicking through a website to have a look at science miracle claims in the Quran, and I mean, there's not much. A lot of them have been deleted over the years. Really,
I already have one up. Wikiislam.net.
I can always open the towel there as over the banister.
Noise coming from somewhere. All right. Kutch, are you there? No, have we lost Kutch? Yeah, we've lost Kutch.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kutch. I was going to say there's a chat room question in the Skype chat. You can read that out.
Sure. Ben Temp Names asks, do any of you act any differently in how you address things in regard to Islam in contrast to Christianity?
Nope.
Not really, except I know more about Christianity, so I can talk more about it.
I think the only difference with me is that don't discuss Christianity, because Christians don't come up to me and try to convince me it's real. Because this country's kind of a cultural Christian rather than a believing Christian country. People just say, "Yeah, I'm a Christian because I was baptized. I'm gonna christen my kids. I'm therefore a Christian. I believe in Christmas and Easter eggs. Therefore, I'm a Christian." You know, they don't come and say to me, "Oh, you do know he walked on water, don't you? You do know he made magic fish sandwiches." You know, and they don't try to convince me of this stuff, so I don't care. And if someone doesn't come up to me and try to convince me that something stupid is true, then I won't tell them it's stupid. But in this case, people did come up to me and they did try to convince me these things were true. So I looked at them, and you know, I just treat it exactly the same as everything else. Like, you know, Jesus and his magic fish. When it comes down to it, he was given a couple of loaves and a couple of fishes, or a loaf and 2 fishes, whatever it was, and he made enough sandwiches to feed everyone. You know, what's the miracle? He's like this magician caterer that made magic fish sandwiches. It's not absolutely fabulous to me, you know. That's silly. A lot of the stuff in Islam are silly. Some bits of it aren't. They're just kind of, you know, don't kill your babies and stuff, you know, and I didn't need religion to tell me that. So, yeah, I'll treat it exactly the same, with one exception, though. There are Christians that try to make credible arguments for their religion. However, I find that's more prevalent in Muslims, because with Christians, I've spoken to them in the past, and I just don't know what kind of a Christian argument I'm going to get. And I don't even know, they're not even sentences half the time. They're just words thrown together, which involve kingdom, Lord, word, flesh, and son. And it's stuff like that. So, oh, well, you know, it's true, because Jesus said, "I am the flesh," and the word was the kingdom of God, and Jesus is the kingdom within you, made flesh of the word. And you did what? You know, you've said all this stuff stuck together. I recognise the individual words, but not the sentence. So I don't generally talk to Christians about stuff, because most of the time I just don't know what the hell they're actually saying. But you know, you know, people argue with me recently for saying this on Twitter, but in their favour, I find that Muslims generally try to make sense. and that's my minimum requirement. You have to at least try to make sense.
Because it was just a point I was going to raise. We had Ali on from Arab Atheists a while back, and in his view, he said that he found the Muslim apologetics is a lot cruder than the Christian apologetics. Is that a view you have as well?
The Christians more.
Yeah, they're more.
The Christians more basic than the Islamic ones.
No, the Christians are a bit more sophisticated with their apologetics than the Muslims.
Basically, I guess I could ask like this: is there a Muslim equivalent of William Lane Craig?
Yeah, that's
no, but what you've got to take into account, though, is William Lane Craig took his argument from Muslims in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, the Kalams hundreds of years ago, and they used to make this argument about the Kalam argument about, well, we think that the universe must have had a beginning. You can't transgress an infinite number of actions or time and so on. But then they actually abandoned the argument because they decided if you argue you can't have an infinite regress, you're arguing that Allah can't exist for eternity before the universe was created. And they saw this flaw and they dumped it. And then, you know, I don't know, like
Christians
Craig was on holiday in Egypt in the library one day or something. I don't know how he came about it, but you know, he's just using an old Islamic arguments that were abandoned a long time ago. And then there are people basically copying him in his arguments, and he's refined it a little bit basically to throw in some sayings by cosmologists, which he sometimes takes out of context. Sometimes he doesn't, probably. I don't know all of them, but, you know, in some cases he does.
He just butchers it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with William Lane Craig, though, he was the first person I saw that exploited that specific debate format where you go first, then the other person's supposed to make their opening statements, and then when he comes on to criticise their opening statements, he comes on and says they didn't refute his opening statements, which he's not supposed to, and you know, and all the deception and stuff, the dishonest debating tactics and stuff. And I've seen various, I've seen one Muslim debater use that technique. Yeah. I don't really listen to that many debates because I find that I usually just end up with my face in my hands, you know, and I'm just going, oh God, no, you know, and it just drives me mad. Especially when people get away with saying stuff and then they're just left to it. And I'm just thinking, no, stop, go and ask him, get him to explain it. You know, and so I don't watch much. And one thing I could never watch would be a debate between a Christian and a Muslim. Oh God! No, except actually, I witnessed one in real life, and I was in the town centre, and there was a Dawaganda stall set up, and they were peddling their miracles and stuff. And then some Christians turn up because the guy that picked up the rubbish was a Christian who carried around a Quran with him just in case he would, some Islamic challenge was sprung on him unexpectedly at any moment, you know. And then him and this Muslim guy were arguing, and they started to argue the age-old one: was Jesus God, Son of God, or just a messenger? And they were arguing, and going, oh, but in the Bible it says, so that's proof. And then the Muslim goes, but in the Quran it says, no, he's not the Son, God is one. And he goes, yeah, but in the Bible it says it, under Quran, and they just kept going backwards and forwards. And then the Christian got really frustrated and said, look, just because it says it in a book, it doesn't make it true, you know. And they both stopped, and they just kind of went, anyway. Then they both started flicking furiously through pages to carry on with the argument. I was really laughing so much. I was going, guys, stay there, stay with that one. No, they were off looking at the other pages. I always remember that fondly. That was good. That was.
Yeah.
All right. Who's got a question now?
Sure, I've got a question. With the recent discovery of the gravitational waves that support the Big Bang, how have the Muslim apologetics responded to this?
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. But if if it hadn't already been used for internal waves in the sea, it probably would have been gravitational waves upon the sea or something. It's the miracle that the gravity of the moon pulls on the waves, causing the tides, and moon can cause a solar eclipse, causing a darkness or something. You can make shit up, can't you? If you don't have to back it up with actual facts, or falsifiable statements, you make shit up all day long. When the Quran talks about God spread out the land, people say, "Oh, there you go, plate tectonics."
Go ahead.
I suppose the Christians are going to use that as well, or they could say that, it was just put there by Jesus to test us while he rode his T-Rex through the Garden of Eden.
No, I have actually seen a few Christian sites, and they're saying, "Oh, this helps confirm creation." They're saying, "Oh, it's proving the universe had a start, so we've been right all along." But,
it's funny hearing an Irish person talk, someone with an Irish accent talking about Jesus. It's just like a comedy show. Father Ted, it takes me back to that program.
Sorry, Max, you go ahead.
I've got a question, and this is given that I'm assuming we have a large North American viewer base and whatnot. So this is something that I hear come up a lot in Muslim believers type thing. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this properly to exclude obvious radicalists such as terrorist bombers and crazy crap like that. There is the extreme nutters in any kind of group out there, but given the extensive the extent that you've actually studied the Quran and the general followers of it, I'm just kind of curious as to what your opinion on any kind of what is there a threat? Is there a threat imposed in the Quran that even general followers may inevitably come over to the U.S. and start hitting us with machetes or some shit like that?
In the Quran itself, I'd say about killing innocent people, I'd say no. In hadiths and things, yes. There's hadiths where some people were sent to kill some people in the night, and they said, but their women and children are with them. What happens if we kill them by accident? We don't want to be guilty of that. And Muhammad was supposed to have said, well, they are of them. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people that will look at that hadith and say, no, it's weak, or someone made it up, or whatever. I don't know. Basically, I don't believe in the hadiths anyway. I generally criticise the Quran itself. The Quran, as far as I can remember, doesn't say anything about going and killing innocent people. The only time, in its defence, really, because I generally found that you'd get people who are extremely anti-Islam or extremely pro-Islam, and then I found, and basically both sides were lying to me. Everyone was lying to me about Islam. That's what I discovered. So I came to it from this point of view as I don't actually give a shit what it says. I'll just read it and tell you what it says. And from what I could see, if I remember correctly, it's been a few years since I've read it. Every time there's a verse telling them to go and kill people that gets quoted by anti-Islamists and anti-Muslims, I'd say they are, by anti-Muslims. It's always preceded by something that says something like, go and chat with them, try to strike up a peace accord. If you can, then honour it. That's great. If you can't, and then they come and try to kill you, then find them whenever you can and slay them. So from what I remember, I don't remember finding anything. The worst thing I found along those lines that I remember was Surah 9 verse 29, which says to go out, to basically go out and make the whole world Islamic and make Islamic rule dominate the world or something like that. I'll have to quickly pull it up because I don't remember it word for word, but it seemed like an unconditional instruction. Fight against such of those who have been given the scripture and believe not in Allah or the last day, and that who don't forbid what Allah has forbidden, and they do not follow the religion of truth until they pay the tribute readily being brought low. This is a non-conditional statement to write. That's it, because this chapter 9, was one of the later ones in the Quran, apparently, because they're not in any kind of chronological order. And there's this concept of there's no contradictions in the Quran. There's only, and so therefore no corrections, there aren't abrogations. So it might say one thing, but then later if it says something else, it's not a contradiction. God just changed it. So if, strictly speaking, if there's any verses out there saying don't go out and try to take over the world, if this one is the last verse on that matter, then it abrogates the others and says go out and fight the people who aren't, basically fight the people who aren't Muslims, invite them to become Muslims. If they don't, and they don't forbid what Allah's forbidden, and they don't believe in Muhammad as a messenger, then go out and fight them until they pay the tribute readily. What that is, it's a dhimmi tax. You non-Muslims take a separate role in society where they have to pay a tax. I mean, Muslims will pay a compulsory charity tax, which I think is 2.5 or 5%, 2.5 I think, of their income. The amount for dhimmis isn't specified, and in some cases, it's been claimed that it's been as high as 50%, and says that they've got to pay the tribute ready, being brought low. They've got to be subdued and made to pay this tax. So the thing is, does this book say to do that? Yes. Do I therefore think there's some kind of threat of Muslim army invasions? No. I don't think that that's an imminent threat. I don't think that it's a future threat. What you've got is probably the majority of the world's Muslims are cultural Muslims. A lot are from poor countries that can't read. Many haven't read the Quran in their own language. They just learn the sounds of the Arabic words, as if it's some kind of a magic spell or something. And then those who have read it, people form God in their own image. So this would be, to some people, would say something like, that was only then because people were really, really bad, and the only way to deal with them was to force them to live under Islamic law. But that was back then. It doesn't need to be done now because we've got international agreements or what have you. So, there's obviously people will excuse different things, interpret it the way they want to. I think people who think that their next door neighbour's nan is going to come and blow up the school bus or something, they're really overreacting, and I think they're a bit crazy.
Somebody feeding back here. That's it gone. All right, guys. Any questions?
Okay, given the silence, I'll ask some.
Yeah.
Just before we carry on, I want to say plate tectonics. All right.
Okay, well, let me ask you about plate tectonics.
Go on, then.
What about them?
Very moving. The verse about spreading out the earth, that's a prediction of plate tectonics. Very simple one to debunk. As I said, verbs in Arabic can have a completed form or a present or ongoing future form. Where it says that Allah spread out the earth, it's a perfect verb. It's past tense. It means whatever happened has stopped. So if it's talking about plate tectonics, thanks very much. You've just given me a 100% verifiable error in the Quran. The person who wrote the Quran thinks that plate tectonics no longer move. So there you go. If they want to claim that that's what it means, then they're claiming that Allah got it wrong. So no one in their right mind would use that one anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on. I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, because when I said plate tectonics earlier, I didn't want people saying, but he didn't tell us, so it must be true.
I was going to move on to like your most recent video series. This is The Truth Uncut. So can you give us a little bit of background on how you came up with the idea for doing that and what was involved in tracking some of the people down? So probably start off with what was This Is the Truth, basically where it all started.
Well, from what I learned, scientists were generally sold different things. I always thought that there would be one deception, and that everyone was brought together under that common deception, but that wasn't the case. I don't remember which of the professors it was I spoke to. One of them had said that he was told that the mullahs were paranoid about science. They were worried that people would read the Quran, think that it was scientifically inaccurate, and then apostatize, and therefore the mullahs were suppressing science in the Islamic world. And seeing as, like, you know, most of our Greek scientific literature comes through Arabic translations, and all the scientific knowledge that came our way through Arabic translators in the past, it was seen as kind of a shame that this scientific approach was given up on. So the idea put to some of them was, what we want to do, we want to go to these mullahs and say, don't worry, I'm an expert on geology, biology, marine life, whatever, and I can tell you that if I read the Quran, there's nothing in there that is absolutely wrong, right? So it's not going to threaten your position of power, and the hope was that they would convince these mullahs, they'd lighten their grip. Science would once again start to flourish in the Arab countries, and he was even asked to bring over the Carl Sagan's Cosmos videotapes with him to show them and stuff like this. So that was one of them. Someone else, this one was definitely Pete Palmer, because I remember him saying it. He was the first point of contact in America. He was told that what they do is they read through the book periodically and try to make sense of words that didn't make sense to them before. Is there any way they can reinterpret them to give them more modern meanings and so on, so that the understanding of the language doesn't get stagnant? In other words, they were saying that they like to change the meaning of words every now and again so that it's not wrong. And he agreed to go and do that. He was the person that phoned up a few other Americans to go along, like Bill Hay, and a few that don't actually get touted around much. And he was interviewed for a number of days, and they interviewed him on camera. And he said at some point later in life he realised that they'd been building him up for a number of days. They'd be basically asking him questions, seeing what his answer was, and then reforming the question slightly so that his answer was slightly different. So at first it'd be, no, that's wrong, to, well, okay, that's not wrong. And then if they continue and push different hypotheses onto him, hypothetical scenarios, what if Muhammad only had one leg or whatever, then he'd say, well, in that case it would be a miracle. And it became apparent that, like, he'd been groomed over a number of days to do this. I mean, Pete Palmer actually, he said that this occurred to him, but he actually didn't know anything about the way that Zindani had used these videos, because he videoed it, and he basically would cut bits of video out. So, for example, the marine biologist Bill Hay, he was told that it was to try to progress science in the Arab world. It was probably him who was asked to bring the Cosmos discs with him, and he he on video said, well, these things that you're saying to me are really quite remarkable. He's not saying what I've read is remarkable. He's saying what you are telling me about what is written is remarkable. And then Zindani comes back onto the screen, edited after the event, says, oh yes, it is indeed quite remarkable that an illiterate man in the desert, in the middle of the desert, could know this 1400 years ago. And when I asked him what he thought would be the source of this information, he said, and then it cuts to Bill Hay saying, well, I would say that it was the divine being. And now you can imagine when I was going through this stage of being convinced that this stuff was real, I'd been shown these videos, and it's like, who am I to question this guy who's got some kind of PhD in marine biology, geology, all sorts of stuff, and then on comes this this physics guy, and he says, oh, Muhammad couldn't have known this stuff just from his mind, he couldn't have known it. And then someone else comes on and goes, no, I have no problem, this came from God. And they're saying these words, and I'm thinking, holy shit, you know, this stuff is real. This is real. This is, you know, you can't trick someone to say, I think it's come from the divine being. How do you do that? But then, of course, when I met Bill Hay, he explained exactly how they did it. And it was the extremely fictitious scenario to say, well, imagine, you know, do you think this information is dead on correct? No. Well, is it dead on correct the way we've said it? Well, you know, the things that you've been saying are extremely difficult to explain, or extremely interesting. There you are, that's one cut. Okay, and do you think that this information could have been from the divine being? No, he probably just got it from Aristotle. Well, what if he'd never heard of Aristotle? Oh, well, he probably heard it from Galen. Oh, what if writings of Galen had never been there? Well, you know, he'd probably just heard it from sailors or tradespeople. Well, what if he lived in the middle of the desert? Well, then he'd have probably travelled to the sea as a merchant. You know, he travelled. Well, what if he lived in the middle of the desert? There were no religious people around him to tell him this stuff. He never used to talk to anyone. He never left the house. And he couldn't read and never had any books. In that case, what do you think? Well, in that case, I'd think it was the divine being. Cut. There you go. And then you just tell the rest of the audience, you just outright said, what do you think of the Quran? Well, I would think it's from the divine being. You just changed the question completely. There you go. You've got your edit. Alfred Kroner, he said that his invitation was absolutely nothing to do with religion at all. It was just some kind of science conference that was held somewhere, and they hold them all over the world, and that's where it was that year, and they just went. And then during a break, some people came on with television cameras and asked him some questions, and he did his best to answer them based on having no knowledge of the subject whatsoever, and on Quran favourable interpretations. And there you go. That's how he got pulled in. I mean, it's, you know, there is the Keith Moore and Vid Persaud, the two guys. They look like a duo, and I have to be careful what I say here without giving them good reason to take me to court, especially being as I'm in the UK and libel's pretty. It's like the libel. Tourist libel spot of the world, isn't it, the UK? Yeah. So, but in the case of Keith Moore, now he does a long speech. I remember kind of glazing over and thinking, well, you know, he's not impressing me with the information in the Quran and reality. And then he said, Muhammad couldn't have known this. I have no problem at all with the proposal that this came from the one who knows everything, God. Right, it just outright says it came from God. And I thought, I've just watched a 45-minute presentation. It's not edited at all. Not only that, but he's reading from a script. And in that, he's just clearly saying, and thus God did it. And, you know, that, and I just thought, oh, you know, there's absolutely no arguing with this. But then you look into it, and the first thing that becomes apparent is Keith Moore says that there's no way that Muhammad could have known this. Yet he's got a book called The Developing Human, which is all the different stages of embryology and what have you. And in the beginning of the book, he talks about embryology throughout history, and he discusses Galen's work. So he's obviously familiar with Galen's work, and there is nothing in the Quran that Galen didn't say beforehand, almost word for word. So the first thing that occurs to me is this guy's not being honest, because he does know how Muhammad could know this stuff, because he's already written about Galen. In addition to that, as you read through his own book contradicts the things that he's saying in the video. He's in the video it'll say something like the bones form first and then the flesh grows on and around the bones. That's what the Quran says, and that's what happens. But then, if you actually read his book, it says the bones and the flesh form in situ at the same time. So his own book is contradicting what he's saying in this video. There's a special edition of this book, The Developing Human. It's by Moore and Persaud. That's the other guy. And it's the Developing Human with Islamic additions, it's called. And it was really hard to get hold of, and I got hold of a copy. I had to contact some bookshop in Saudi Arabia, and they went out hunting for it. And they were very helpful, very nice actually. And what's happened is it's got his normal book and then interspersed the pages that have been added by Zindani or his team, saying, well, if you look at this, let's compare it to this hadith, let's compare it to this verse in the Quran, look how brilliant it is. Yeah, it's obviously God magic going on here. And then obviously, as I said on the other pages, Moore's book explains that that's actually wrong. Because, for example, it's in the book it says something like the bones are clothed with flesh or something, or the flesh is on and around the bones. It doesn't say it develops on and around the bones after the bones are there. It just says the flesh is on and around the bones. And then they've gone, oh, flesh on and around the bones, clothed with flesh. That's it, it's a miracle. Put the page in, claim the miracle. And then you turn to the front of the book, and this is where my final suspicion, put his claims to rest. Persaud also on the videos were like, oh, no, this is too much coincidence. No, it's too much for coincidence. There's definitely more behind this. Look in the front of the book, and then there's a list of people that it thanks for their help with developing the book. And guess who's in there? I've mentioned him at the beginning of the show.
Oh, I'm so
That guy you interviewed, the Oceanist?
Before that, linked directly to Zindani.
what is
I'll give you a clue. He lived in Pakistan and he got shot in the eye by American forces.
Bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Oh.
With thanks to blah 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 Osama bin Laden. Now, did Osama bin Laden contribute his wealth of knowledge on embryology? Perhaps. You know, I don't know, mate. It could be anything. His knowledge on hadith, maybe he did that. More credible. Or was there something to do with his assets as a multi-billionaire involved in some way? You know, and to this day, Keith Moore will not say that he became a Muslim. He says he didn't become a Muslim, but won't say why. Oh, well, you know, I kind of believe in God in the same kind of way, but I interpret it different. No, if someone had came to me in my field of expertise and proved that 1400 years before it could possibly be known, something was known, and I thought that has definitely come from God, and after it said, and if you believe this and don't do as you're told, I'm going to burn you forever, you wouldn't say, oh, well, you know, I'll take the risk, even though I believe it's true. You would become a Muslim, wouldn't you? You know, it says, if you receive the scripture and you reject it, you're going to burn forever. And then what? He just thought, oh, well, you know, I'll take the risk. Forever's not that long.
Okay, do you have a chat room question that's come in related to this? It's from Mary Ziller, and he's asking, what kind of reaction have you had to the This Is the Truth Uncut series?
Brilliant.
Okay.
Very good. Most positive support has probably been from Muslims.
Okay.
There you are. Bet you weren't expecting that, were you?
No, well, I've seen some of the comment sections and some of the excuses people give for quite amusing.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't read the comments anymore because I used to read them a few years ago, and then I'd answer, and then they'd cross-examine me, and then I'd end up debating in YouTube comments and stuff. And you know, one-to-one with people just was never worth it. It took up so much of my time that I just don't read the comments now. I sometimes look at them, but then I just don't reply. I haven't looked at them for a very long time. All I know is basically what people say to me in private when they write to me. There's a verse in the Quran that says, "Do not cover the truth with falsehood, and do not conceal the truth while you know it." There's a thing in Islam called bid'ah, which is invention or innovation. That's if you say something about your religion that's not true, then you're inventing stuff, and that's very, very badly prohibited. So if these people go out and are saying that there are these miracles in the Quran that aren't really miracles in the Quran, then they're worried that they're committing bid'ah, and they're also going against this verse about spreading lies. So the only correspondences I've had through YouTube directly were saying thank you for pointing out this forgery, this deception. I am now no longer going to say this to people because I don't want to spread lies. And that was really rewarding for me because I expected it to just be like, you know, non-Muslims saying, haha, you exposed those lies. But no, most positive comments were from Muslims, except for the one which was addressed to the rationalizer shaitan, which is the Arabic for Satan. Just basically calling me various things. And of course, the reaction from the QuranProject.org hasn't been too good because they've got this book, and at the back it's like what scientists say about the Quran and all these miracles with Bill Hay and everything in the back. And so, of course, I wrote to them and said, here's the verse in the Quran that says don't spread lies. Here are the people saying that you're lying. You need to take that out of your book. And, you know, for years, they just left it in. They ordered reprints. They left them in. And I'd see on their Facebook page, here's a big shipment of new books. It was still in there. Recently, in the online version, they've taken them out. I don't know if it's in the printed version or not. But they've left in the scientists that I haven't yet interviewed. I find that really dishonest. Everyone that I've interviewed that was in there, they've taken out. But all of the others were probably just telling the truth and weren't tricked. So we'll leave those in there. So, because initially I phoned them. And initially I wrote to them, but I wasn't sure if the message went through. It was on one of these web form submit comments thing. I gave it some time, and I hadn't heard anything. And I phoned, and I said, "Can I speak to the person that does the editing? Why? Because there's comments in there that are obviously taken out of context. I've interviewed the people. Yeah, we know. What do you want?" Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to know that you knew, basically. Yeah, but what do you want now? I don't want anything now. That's it. Thanks. It's so aggressive. It's like I'd been distributing nude photos of his mum or something. He was really, really offended by the fact that I wouldn't say exposed because it's not new. People knew this. But the only reason that I decided to try to video chat with them is I found Alfred Kroner first, and I wrote to him, and he wrote me back this letter, and it was obviously a copy and paste letter because it was addressed to Dear XXX, and it just his standard thing. He didn't answer any of the questions that I wrote. In this first section, I wrote and asked 5 questions, and then underneath that, he then answered my questions, and I wrote, and I was, oh, brilliant, now I know what happened in the case of Alfred Kroner. And I thought, but I can't just put this email on the web, because I could have just typed this myself. No one's going to believe. I wouldn't believe it, except for that I know that I'm honest, And so I asked him to do this video interview, and he agreed. And it was some time afterwards that I realised that in the past, I had actually heard Phil Hellenes on YouTube had read out this exact same letter. I was scouring through his old videos and I came across one, and it was about scientists and the Quran and stuff. And someone called Jeremias111, I think it was, had sent him an email he'd had from Kroner, and there it was, Dear XXX, and the whole thing. And it suddenly hit me. I remember hearing him read it out and thinking, yeah, he could have just written that. And it was exactly what I suspected people would think of me. So that's why I went to the video interviews, obviously.
Yep, I wanted to bring in Kitch there on that subject, like with scientists going to conferences. I mean, is there any guidelines in place for what kind of conferences you can go to and that? Or like, you know, how these guys got misrepresented and led into things?
Well, no, it's just, you know, what can you do? It's just a meeting, isn't it? It's, you know, it wasn't like some...
so that was directed
like
to
only
Kitch,
symposium of Einstein and Dirac and people, you know, it wasn't anything like that. It was just, you know, people turn up and they tell each other what they've found out about geology recently. You know, it was that kind of thing. They hosted it. I mean, Bill Hay said that they took him out there a few times, and it's actually Bill Hay that said they'd been grooming him. I think Pete Palmer said that they'd been sussing him out to word the stuff correctly. He'd been helping them without realising it. It was Bill Hay that said that they'd been grooming him, and he said on the one day they took him out on a boat, right, and they took him out to sea, and he's out in the middle of nowhere, and you know they're going around, and he's all happy, and there's zooming around their head, wind's blowing in his hair, and he's loving it. And then they start filming him and asking him these questions, and you know, he's saying stuff, and he's being guarded in his answers. And he said, but as time went on, it became apparent that they weren't going to take me back to shore until I told them what they wanted to hear. He says, I'm stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I'm practically held prisoner, and then they want me to say some specific things, and if I don't say them, I know I'm not going to get back in. You know, he said it's a hot day. I was just desperate to go home. He said, so I just told them what they wanted to hear. So it was after that they then got him in and recorded him saying stuff. Yeah, I'd have been pooing myself. I would if someone had done that. You know, I'm going to tie stuff to my feet and throw me in the water or something.
Yeah, it was Kitch who directed that question too, but you're unmuted now, Kitch. Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of missed. Sorry, I was actually just dealing with a troll in the chat. Kind of missed a little bit of it. What was the?
It was just about, like, you know, how these scientists were set up for this. Have you come across that? Like, because I know you're invited to conferences quite a bit, or are you advised on what kind of conferences you should and shouldn't go to?
Generally, you can really tell how the conference is set up by just going to the website and just how they set out the information that they put up.
Yeah.
Like what the conference is about, who's been invited, the kind of talks, the scope, and that sort of thing. But we haven't been really in science. You're not really trained into how to do interviews with the public or with media. It's something you really have to learn by yourself. There's no guide. Any guide that there is kind of something you have to buy, like in a, you know, guidebooks. I suppose to be a few guidebooks, but nothing really set in the training, in undergraduate or even postgraduate. Not that I found, even though I've done a few postgraduate modules, but nothing on speaking to the public or giving interviews or how to be wary of people who are just out to misrepresent what you're saying or misrepresent your science.
So it's fairly.
So that's probably something that should be at least advised on, at least some way under your undergraduate.
I suppose it's more prevalent now, isn't it, with the people that say that global warming isn't occurring or it's not man-made. So it's more prevalent that people are misquoted and misrepresented. You know, the impression I got from talking to these guys, you know, I talked to them a bit off camera before and after, and the impression I got from these guys was just, well, I'm just a scientist, I do scientific stuff. When people make claims, They give me data and evidence with it, and if I don't believe them, I check it. I don't expect someone just to come and outright lie to me. And if they do, I can check it if I don't believe it. But the fact that they were also disarmed by the fact that these people weren't actually making claims. They were asking them for opinions on things according to their scientific expertise. So, as far as they were concerned, these people weren't making claims, so their guards were down as well. So, he was very clever. He got them on a few levels, and they all said he was a very charismatic and charming man. Yeah. I mean, his career now, he lives in the Yemen now. He's on America's Most Wanted terrorist list. And he makes videos about how he's got scientific proof from brain scans that women aren't as good witnesses as men. In the Quran it says, get a witness. If you can't find a man, get 2 women. So a male testimony is worth double that of a woman. And so he holds up these brain scans and says, here's a picture of a woman's brain, here's a man's brain. And there's scientific evidence that when a woman is listening, only half of her brain is turned on. Stuff like this. This is the crap he's coming out with. And he was being interviewed on some TV station, and they're saying, so, shakes his army, we understand you've discovered a cure for AIDS. Yes, that's correct. Right, okay, how did you do that, considering you haven't got any medical training at all? Oh, it was in a hadith. What, so there's a hadith saying how to cure AIDS? No, I can't tell you which hadith it was, but there's one in there that gave me a clue, and I checked it, and I've been curing people of AIDS. Right, okay. Why can't you tell us? Because the big drugs companies in America, they'll discover it, they'll patent it, and then they'll sell it to people at a really high price. And I want to give it away for nothing. So, well, why don't you just tell everyone what it is then? They can't patent it. Oh no, because they'll patent it. All these excuses. So, to save some people getting saved from AIDS at a cost, he's going to let everyone die of AIDS because he doesn't want someone to patent a hadith. That's his excuse. I mean, the guy is an absolute crackpot lunatic. Yeah. He really is. He's just completely bonkers.
Yeah, because they actually found out at his clinic that the people just still died of AIDS at his clinic, as well as alleged clinic that he had.
You know what? I didn't even look further into it. I suspected he didn't even have a clinic or know anyone with AIDS. I just, I didn't actually go as far as to think he'd really tested stuff. Yeah. I just thought, he's just made this shit up yesterday, and he's phoned up the press to tell them so that he can say, look, it's from Allah because it cures AIDS. And I just thought that was it. It didn't even occur to me that he would actually have test subjects. That's the first I've heard of it, And I thought he was mad already, but if he did that, then he's really mad.
All right, guys, we're coming up for 5 minutes left, so who wants to get in a final question? Max, I think you've got some questions ready.
Okay. How do you find the patience to dispute all the claims that you run up against?
Obsessive compulsive disorder.
Fair enough.
I suppose I'll just kind of come into it. So, you hinted at it there. Is there more to come from the This Is the Truth Uncut series?
Well, I'm in touch with a Japanese scientist. His statements were something like, the stuff in the Quran is really, really impressive. When we look at the sky with telescopes, we only look at a small part, but the Quran tells us to look at a whole. And I think that the Quran has shown me how to study the heavens in future or something like that. And it's really kind of a non-committal, I'm being polite kind of a statement. And but obviously, he's listed as someone that thinks it's a miracle and stuff. It's taught him how to do astronomy. And I've been in touch with him, and he wasn't aware of this stuff, like Pete Palmer wasn't. He wasn't aware of this stuff. And somebody who watches my videos, his wife is Japanese, and she's kindly been translating in emails, and she's phoned. She spoke to his wife for about half an hour, who was shocked. And the reason that they're shocked is this Quran Project org, they've been buying billboard space in places like Waterloo Station, Victoria train station, the busiest train stations in the UK, and they've got these full-size billboards all about miracles in the Quran and stuff like this. Did you know that the Big Bang's in the Quran and all of this stuff? And then they've been they're doing advertising wraps on papers for the London Herald, is it called, or the Herald or something in London, and some other newspaper. And it's what scientists accept miracles of the Quran is the headline. And then there's this Japanese guy, his name, and what he said about it. So they're saying he accepted miracle claims of the Quran, and I'm hoping that he will come on, but I don't know Japanese culture. I'm being told that older people in Japan, the culture's more that they'd want to talk to my face and things like this. But there's no question of me going to Tokyo, I'm afraid.
Okay, we're coming up for the last 3 minutes, so we usually just go for our final thoughts. So, Rash, your final thoughts, and if you want to shout out anything, any upcoming projects and that, you're free to.
No, there's nothing I really want to shout out for. The thing is I'd just say to anyone, I don't care what you believe, to be frank. I really don't give a damn. I care what you tell me is true, and I care whether it's true or not. That's the only thing I care about. If you read history, what people believed at the time and so on, what information the Greeks passed on, and then reread the Quran, and you'll just see it in a completely different way. So that's my advice to anyone who's either thinking that it might be true or already thinks that it's true.
All right, I'll just go around my co-host. So, Max, you're back from your hiatus. Your final thoughts, please.
Sorry, what was that?
Your final thoughts. We usually just round up everyone's final thoughts with them.
Final thoughts. Actually, I think Rationalizer put it very, very good. I don't really care what people want to believe. I mean, I grew up a theist, so I understand how you sort of grow up into it and you never really question it and things like that. But yeah, when you want to step over that boundary and sort of assert this as fact or scientific, then you're going to come up against a wall of facts that dispute your claims, and that's where we see conflicts. So outside of that, I don't know. Enjoy your life.
All right, Kurt, final thoughts, please.
I'd just like to echo that, and thanks, and major thank you to the Rationalizer for coming on the show and making it really interesting and insightful.
Okay, and Marty.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I feel like Islam is something that we really don't talk about all that often. People often say that, why don't you pick on Islam as much as you pick on Christianity and so on. And it's a simple case of I don't know enough about Islam, and I live in a society that is, where Christianity is far more common than Islam. So, and I think we all can say the same thing. But it's great to actually have someone around for the show who knows a thing or two about Islam and who addresses it in a skeptical way. So it was really interesting to have you here.
Yeah, a big thank you to Rash for coming along.
There is just one more thing I'd want to say, and it's not about Islam or Muslims. It's about non-Muslims. And as I said from the start, I discovered that Muslims were lying to me and non-Muslims were lying to me. Non-Muslims who criticise Islam, who were making up lies about it, they're just not really helping any kind of situation at all. It just makes it difficult for Muslims to trust anyone who doesn't agree with them. And the people that stereotype, there's like Anjem Chowdhury in the UK, who calls for people to be killed all over the place and what have you. These people are fringe nutcases, and 99% and over of the Muslims you will ever meet are absolutely nothing like that whatsoever. And what I'm trying to get across is, just because you don't like what you read in a book don't go around hating the people that think that's true, because you don't actually know what it is that they believe or what they're like. So I just wanted a bit of suppress some anti-Muslim rhetoric that I dislike thoroughly.
Okay, yeah, very true.
Absolutely agree.
And thanks everyone for turning up. It's been a fantastic turnout tonight. Really, really wonderful to see all your people out. And we're back next weekend. And I'm going to ask you again, how do you pronounce the guy's name? I know it's
Patrik Linderfors.
Yeah, that's our guest next week. I'll just quickly read. He is a professor of anthropology at Stockholm University. So it's another Norwegian for Marty to interview. Sorry, I had to slip that in. But yeah, he's got a nice little book out saying, God, oh geez, the title's in Swedish, so I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. But he's got a nice little book out. I'll put the link, and he's also doing a Kickstarter for his next new big book called Divine Placebo, and he's kindly agreed to come along. And I'm speaking to him right now because also next weekend the Madness, Mayhem and Charity is running at the same time, so I'm speaking to him to maybe we can sell off a few copies of his book with the proceeds going to the AIDS charity, which is all very worthwhile. And everyone, please tune in for that and us next week and donate some money to all of that. So thank you very much. Again, everyone in the chat rooms, big thumbs up to Rash for turning along. It's been really fascinating. Big thumbs up from the crew. And we'll see you all in a week's time. And I say, pay attention to the Facebook, the podcast, and the YouTube. The links are all down below. It'll be uploaded within the next few days. All right. Good night, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it.
Bye.
Quite gullibly at the time, I was looking at them and I thought these are really convincing, you know, not realising that they'd really been translated. And I think I was ready to go out proselytising, and but the first people I would have wanted to do that to would have been my family. And in anticipation of their counter-arguments, I decided that I would try to counter-argue myself so that I could have an answer ready for them. And I ended up counter-arguing myself out of it. And after spending that much time doing it, I just thought, well, I can either just be happy that I've worked it out and go on with my life, or I can record it. You know, and I just think I'll make the videos that I wish I could have watched a year and a half ago or something at the time I started making them, that would have saved me the time. So that's basically it. And so throw that in with a little bit of desire to be creative, and that's how it ended up starting.
One thing, the history of the whole science in the Quran, where did that actually spring from? Was it Sheikh Zindani that really, was he the kind of popularizer of that, really?
Well, you get what. Before that, I think it's probably in the 70s, Maurice Bucaille, he was the physician to, was it King, I forgot the name, King Faisal, I think, and he was asked to write a book which was something like the Bible, the Quran in light of science, or something like that. I forget the name. And basically what it was is it was an exercise in saying, if we take the Bible literally, it's wrong, but if we don't take the Quran literally, it's not wrong. So rather than saying it contains this miraculous information, what they were doing was saying, if you've got any kind of scientific knowledge, don't worry, you're not going to lose your faith, because I can explain everything. So it'd be stuff like how the Quran will talk about everything being created in 6 days. So what he'd do then is he'd go on to say the Arabic word liyom not only means days, but can mean some kind of epoch. So, you know, that's not contradictory. And basically he went through what people would see as problems, and told you why they're not problems, which he then pushed a slight bit further with a claim on the death of the Pharaoh of Moses, and tried to kind of push that a little bit as a bit of a miracle. But it was after that, really. I think that was the first step towards it. Okay. But then Zindani took it further, he was apparently doing talks at various universities in the Middle East, and it was allegedly one of Zindani's talks that got him introduced to Osama bin Laden, and it set him off on his religious career. And he was his spiritual advisor. Apparently, he was the person that used to advise him whether or not a certain kind of attack.
And it's something that comes up quite a lot when you're dealing with Islamic. They always go on about how difficult the Quran is to translate. Is it really that difficult? Is Arabic so difficult to translate into English?
Well, I can't tell you because I don't speak. I only know a few words and a few semantic rules and things. There are tools on the internet that will let you look at the individual words, see what the root of those words are, where else the words are used in the Quran. So you can look at the same word in different contexts. So that's one useful thing. But I think the very important thing to do is if you look at the classical commenters on the Quran, and the older the better, really, because they're closer to the beliefs of the time. You can read what people who did know Arabic said about it. So, for example, Al-Jalalain, there was two brothers, the Jalal brothers, and their commentary on this verse is, we have adorned the lowest heaven, the one closest to earth, with lamps, with stars, and made them missiles against the devils, should they attempt to listen by stealth to the revelation, in which case a meteor of fire detaches itself from the star, just like a brand is taken from a fire, and it either kills the jinn or deprives him of his senses. The star itself isn't displaced from its position. Basically, it shoots off a little bit of shooting star. So that's Al-Jalalain. These brothers obviously knew Arabic, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be two of the most famous commenters on the Quran if they didn't. They were the end of the 15th century, early 16th century, and that's only a few hundred years back. And even with the knowledge and advancements that we'd made since the 7th century, they were still claiming that this is what this means, that stars actually shoot off little bits of meteorite. And of course that was another one of the misconceptions, is that the stars are all the same distance away from the Earth, which is why you don't observe any parallax.
Guys, do you have any follow-up questions there?
Yes, I got a couple questions. Granted, I just want to precursor that the context to which I'm forming a lot of these questions is sort of playing devil's advocate, because, well, it's more fun. Have you ever found any claims in the Quran that were true that don't fit the cultural knowledge in the 7th century in that region?
I have scoured endlessly, and basically what I find in the Quran is mediocre repetition. I mean, it may be beautiful in Arabic. I'm told it is, even by ex-Muslims who are Arabic speakers. They say some parts of it are a bit crap, but some of it are linguistically absolutely beautiful. But, for me, that's not enough of a miracle. How beautifully can you say, when you're dead, we're going to burn your skin off, and then we're going to put some new skin on so we can burn it off again, and that's going to happen forever?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Trolling with Logic for the 22nd of March 2014. It's 7 p.m. here in the UK, and it's 3 p.m. Eastern Time over in the States and Canada. Just the usual announcements. That's a live call-in show on all kinds of secular-related issues. If you do want to call in, the Skype contact, it's scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. It's Trolling with Logic. Just send me a quick PM, give me the gist of your question, and we'll add you into the call in due course. Please don't call the show. It'll just annoy us, and we'll probably just boot you then. But, and excuse me, because I've got a cold right now, so you're probably listening to like a very bizarre Scottish Darth Vader here. And also, when you call in, you're granting us permission to use your likeness because all calls are recorded and uploaded for later use. And as you can see in the corner, this is public domain, this recording, so feel free to copy it, mirror it, and distribute it any way you want. And I think that's it. And also, if you can't get through, if you didn't get your question in, contact at Rolling with Logic, and if you want, we could forward the questions on to our guest tonight. So I'll very quickly introduce my panel tonight. Welcoming back, as always, Marty. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, and welcoming back as well, Kitch. It's been a while since you've been on, I think.
I missed the last show, but I was there for the one before that.
All right, cool.
So I missed one.
And it's been a very, very long time since our third man here has been on. Welcoming back, Maxman. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm quite confident that nobody remembers me except for the people I'm talking to, but thanks anyway.
The few hardcore...
Who are you again?
All right. So I'll very quickly introduce our special guest tonight. Just to let everyone know, our scheduled guest couldn't make it tonight, so this man has generously offered to stand in. So you'll all know him from the Gin and Tonic show, one of our sister shows. He was a former host there. He's a well-known YouTube vlogger, mostly focusing on counter-apologetics to Islamic claims of science, and most recently a very well-made video series called This is the Truth Uncut, where he tracked down some scientists who have been court-mined into appearing to support claims of scientific knowledge in the Quran. So a very warm welcome, everyone. Thumbs up in the chat room, and please welcome in the Rationalizer. How are you doing?
Good evening, everybody. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Thanks for coming along. It's good to have you. So I don't know, does any of the panel have any questions ready, or shall I just get started?
Sure. Just a general question to start up. How did you get into video making, and why did you decide to focus on your video series?
I feel artistic, but I'm rubbish at art. So I do stuff with computers, and it's kind of a good way to do artistic things because other people have written special effects and stuff, so you can kind of use those and then pretend you're really good. So it kind of made me feel artistic. That's why I made videos. Really, I think it was just a long time ago when I was at a low point in my life. There was at some point someone was showing me some leaflets telling me about all these miraculous scientific things in the Quran, and you know, quite was permitted or forbidden. And this Sandani had taken it further and was saying not only is it compatible with stuff, but it actually preempts scientific discovery, talks about things he couldn't possibly have known, which he then took onto a further level by tricking these various scientists to say certain things, which he then took out of context and pretended that the scientific community of the West believed it too.
Okay, Marty, there's a chat room question that just came
Yes.
in.
Can you address Quran chapter 67 verse 5? Muslims claim it has scientific basis. Okay, for one, what is it?
It says that Allah ordained the sky with lamps and used them as missiles to drive away jinn. I think that's roughly what it says. Okay. Now, I don't think it actually literally mentions stars. It just says lamps. The heavens were decorated with these lamps.
If you want, I can say the verse here just to clarify.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we have, from of old, adorned the lowest heaven with lamps, and we have made such lamps as missiles to drive away evil ones. We have prepared for them the penalty of the blazing fire.
So, and just what's the science that apparently supports this?
Actually, it's probably one of the clearest things in the Quran that contradicts science. I mean, when it's talking about decorating the heavens with lamps, it's pretty obvious that, you know, you've beautified the heaven with lamps. It's talking about stars, obviously, When it talks about using them as missiles, it's then talking about shooting stars. The backing story to this is supposed to be that whenever some kind of revelation was given to a prophet on Earth, that the jinn would all stand on each other's shoulders and make a really tall jinn pyramid. Jinn being a person that's made out of fireless smoke, but looks like a normal human. They'd make these jinn pyramids so that they could get really close to heaven and listen to what the revelations were. So then they could get down to the soothsayers really quickly and give them a bit of the revelation, but mix in a little bit of lies. So then you'd hear the beauty of the revelation, and it'd be mixed in with lies, and they'd use it to trick people. So what Allah would then do is he'd shoot shooting stars at them to shoot them down, to stop them from doing that. So that's the background of this verse. I mean, if you look at literally what it says, the nearest heaven was adorned with lamps to beautify the nearest heaven. Shooting stars aren't in the sky adorning it and beautifying it. They're only there for a split second. So it appears to be talking about the stars being the lamps, and that from the stars come missiles. They've made these stars missiles. So it seems as if it's saying that shooting stars either are actually stars or come from stars, and that they shoot down these jinn. Now, obviously, there's a lot of problems with that. Obviously, but I mean, first of all, if it is one of the apologetics that I've heard on this is, well, it's not wrong. Receding back to the Maurice Bouquet level, it's not wrong because ultimately they are made in stars, because all the rock and everything's made in stars. So it could be a miracle. But this is saying that if they're saying that the shooting stars have ultimately come from stars, well, they're like the nearest one's like 4 light years away. You'd have to know 4 years in advance where the jinn were going to be and what they were doing, and then shoot something at the speed of light temporarily to get to Earth and shoot them down. I mean, if that doesn't reek of predestiny, then I don't know what does. Interestingly, though, I've been reading a lot on historical cosmology recently, and there were various beliefs, and geocentricity was the one thing that most people believed in. And I mean, the Quran gets it so wrong. It's so much more geocentric than I ever thought it was. But one of these beliefs was Aristotle described that everything above a certain layer, a certain height, was ether. And if stirred, ether would kind of turn into fire. And the sun and the moon and the stars move slowly, which is why they don't burn up. But then some of these beliefs were that this kind of dome over the earth called a firmament, and it blocks out the light from the heavens, and amongst the stars were dim stars that you can't see, and that now and again they would fall off the firmament and fall towards earth, and as they did, they'd stir up the ether and burn up on the way down. So there was literally a belief that they were stars stuck on a firmament, and when they fell down they would burn up as shooting stars. And if you look at this verse in the Quran, mate, it's exactly the kind of wording you would expect from someone who believed that was true. In addition to that, actually, as a point of interest, because there's the person who's written this had this belief that shooting stars shoot down these jinn at times of revelation. What I did is I went to some NASA sites and I backtracked through annual meteor showers, and there was a meteor shower in the holy month of Ramadan on the very year when Muhammad claimed prophethood. So it could possibly have been a bit of an influence on him, looking up in the sky, seeing all these shooting stars during the holy month of Ramadan, and then it's just another part of his confirmation bias, I suppose, that something big is happening. Oh, and it's me. But as to what the science is, I've never heard anyone actually say that this contains any kind of scientific pre-knowledge at all. I've only ever heard people try to explain it away and done so badly.
Yep. Just one question related to that.